This is a special edition of the Pilot's Advisor podcast with Ryan Fleming. He had a recent guest appearance on the Wealth Warehouse podcast, where Ryan shared essential insights for pilots nearing retirement or planning for the future. In the episode, he breaks down effective strategies for building stability through tools like dividend-paying whole life insurance. And he discusses the critical concept of sequence of returns risk, a factor that can significantly impact retirement savings if not managed properly. This episode will feature highlights from their discussion, and don't forget you can check out the full episode by clicking the link in the description of this episode. Sit back, relax, and let's enjoy some of the conversation between Ryan and the hosts of Wealth Warehouse.
Man, so there's really two parts that we want to dive into. One being, there's two parts to retirement planning: accumulation and distribution. So there's going up the mountain, getting to the top of Mount Everest and then coming back down. And I think, as we all know, that analogy that more people die on their way down the mountain than up the mountain, which is certainly true in retirement because that's when everybody graduates from this earth anyway. But we say, more people die on the way down because they don't have a plan. So let's first talk about like the accumulation strategy. So building up, getting ready for retirement, and then we'll move to what do you do in retirement? Maybe what are those things you should be thinking about now, or questions you should be asking now as a 30, 40-year-old man or woman planning for that time that you aren't thinking about right now. So what's your overall kind of accumulation strategy for the pilots you work with?
Well, I think it's I think, of course, I always talk about pilots because that's who I work with, but I think that all pilots know that they have to save for retirement. What they don't know is how the distribution phase of retirement works. They have no real understanding of that. And the details of what you're doing today really matter for being in a good spot in the distribution phase. And I think it's an interesting environment now, since all the airlines lost their pensions. Those companies are putting in B fund contributions that almost max out their 401k for them every year. So then the question is, well, what should I be doing with my money, the income that I'm bringing home? And that's where I think that a lot of pilots don't have a good plan to where to put their assets and how to prepare for retirement. And of course, what I think they should do is start building, getting an overfunded whole life policy that's going to help them in retirement, filling a lot of those things that we're going to talk about going down the backside of the mountain.
Yeah. So if you don't have a plan for the money that's coming in, what's going to happen to that money? This is where some of that, from everybody you hear, every financial entertainer, you can take the good, discard the rest. And, we bag on some of them quite a bit, but, one of them says oftentimes, have a plan for that money, have that money, it's earmarked before you even receive it. So if you don't have a plan, you're either going to do something stupid with it or consume.
Well, you're trying to be nice too, because obviously paying yourself first is a big thing. But if you're just going to have it sit in your checking or savings account, not only are you going to go broke very safely, but your spouse is going to spend it. So a good strategy is get that money working for you right away. And Paul's laughing. Come on, Paul, I know you got something to say.
Well, there's usually one of the couple that likes to spend more than the other, right? One's a, hey, let's keep this, and one says, YOLO.
It's true. We have that conversation when I'm doing intake with a new client, and
by the way, Paul's the spender in his family. The guy's got 7 cars.
Yeah,
but he's not.
He had a good point until you said that. But Paul,
it's okay. No, he's right. But you look at an income level, and I tell them, hey, I've got clients that make half of what you make, and this is what they're paying in dividend paying whole life premium, and their face drops because a lot of that money is just spent and they can't account for it. They have no idea. It's probably Netflix, Chick-fil-A, and Papa John's and going out to eat and stuff. So you're right. There's multiple layers of protection here that we need to do. You have to protect the money from probably from somebody else, not only the government, but you have to protect it from yourself. Like, I'll spend it. That's why I pay a high premium. I'll spend it.
Yeah, well, you have more discipline than that, but you won't spend it on stupid stuff. But most people will. Hey, I got extra cash. Company's funding my 401k. Retirement's taken care of. Is kind of the mindset. My retirement's plan. It's already set. I don't need to worry about it.
Well, and I think it's called, what I think of it is, it's called forced discipline. Set it up so you already have that money earmarked. It's already got somewhere that it's going to go, and you got to force that discipline, because we're emotional creatures and we don't stay disciplined. If we turn an automatic investment off, we probably won't turn it back on. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And, and a lot of people in our society are in massive credit card debt. I mean, that's something that we haven't even talked about. That's money mismanagement. And I look at airline pilots no differently than like in the military. You know what somebody makes. It's not a secret, right? Mm-hmm. And to come across those that are savers and are so well prepared for retirement, and that exact same person that makes that exact same income doesn't have a pot to pee in, and you go, well, what happened here? And it's a lack of planning. And one thing that we talk about with overfunded whole life is the time factor and how much more efficient a policy will get. Well, the time factor is the biggest factor in any of this. So when's the time to start an overfunded whole life policy, or when's the time to start saving? Well, the answer is now.
Yeah,
or 20 years ago, but
20 years ago would have been great.
Yeah.
There's a fact: life insurance will never be cheaper than it is today, because you'll never be younger than you are today. And it's all, it's heavily dependent on age and, of course, health. Are you going to be healthier tomorrow than you are today? Maybe, maybe not. Most people know. So you're right. The best time to do this is 20 years ago. Man, the young 20-year-old kids that I work with, and I call them kids, but I mean, they're grown adults. They're going to be way ahead of their peers when they're our age, right? Just because they've done this. So
if you guys don't mind, just me thinking back to this storm, I think the number right now is it's pushing over 250 people that lost their lives that they know of right now. And I'm sadly, when my father passed away, I had to write a check. Okay. And I learned a lot from that. And I think about overfunded whole life a lot with just retirement planning and how it gives you options and everything else, but not even touching on the legacy planning aspect of this. How many of those individuals had, protection? And what does it look like for their family going forward? And I think about that stuff because it's scary and it hurts and it's real. It's real life. And I know, with what you guys do with your money, that if something happens to you tomorrow, your family's very well protected. And there's something about sleeping well at night, knowing that.
No, you nailed it. I don't sleep well at night, but that's for other reasons, I guess. But you're right. Odds are, Ryan, almost none of them had.
Yeah, that's extremely sad.
Statistically speaking, almost none of them. If they were older, they probably had bought term and invested the difference if they had done anything at all, and that term has since expired.
Or where was most of their wealth, perhaps? Inside the walls of their home.
In the walls of their home.
Which no longer exists.
Which doesn't exist. Same thing that happened to Katrina in 2005. Yeah.
So how many people who lose their homes to a natural disaster like this say, thank God I had my home completely paid off?
Right.
None. Zero would say that, because now they've got no capital available. Now they got to wait for insurance to pay out. Does everybody have flood insurance? And then in East Tennessee, I don't know. That's man. So having access to capital is tax-free. Access to capital is huge.
Paul, you said something that caught my ears when I was listening, and you said the whole adage of buy term and invest the difference, and that immediately made me think of Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey has helped a lot of people that are in massive credit card debt, but that's not the average person that we talk to. I think his ideal clients makes $50,000, $60,000 a year and is in massive credit card debt. And I was even guilty of that as a younger kid, saying, "Oh yeah, buy term. Why would you have permanent life insurance? It's so much more expensive," without really understanding how much that can leverage and protect, your assets or your wealth.
Yeah, Dave and I recently did an episode titled, what was it, Dave? Whole life insurance is actually cheaper than term insurance or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, we could prove by the numbers that whole life insurance over time is cheaper than term insurance.
But you bring up a good point. Like, I've owned whole life insurance since 2003. So I was 23 years old, and everyone was poo-pooing me like, hey, that's a stupid place to put money and whatever. And then here we all are, 20, 21, 22 years later, and we're all paying a crap load of whole life insurance premium. And so even though I did it by accident, right? Just because someone
told me to do it. Structure is the first thing I think of. How is it structured?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like that.
It wasn't awesome. It wasn't participating whole life, but it still had cash value, and I was able to move that cash value over to my new IBC style dividend-paying whole life policies that Dave sold to me. I was his first client.
Yeah. But, I didn't really have to sell anything to you.
Well, that's true.
I gave you a different way to think, and you grabbed onto it and went with it, which is really what it is. We're not selling a product. It's a new way of thinking, which a lot of listeners maybe not, especially on, this being replayed on Ryan's podcast, a lot of listeners not familiar with whole life, and they only think there's one way for whole life insurance to be designed, which is you pay a lot of money, you got zero cash value for many years. It takes decades to catch up. That's the traditional way of designing it, and that's what most people think of. But if you work with somebody who's a professional and an expert in the infinite banking concept and properly designing these things, that cash value accumulates very quickly, and you have access to it almost immediately. And if you had a properly structured one in 2003, 22, 21 years ago, Paul, that thing would be a money machine today.
It'd be incredible. It'd be incredible. And it was, riding on those late 70s, early 80s interest rates that were, beyond double digits. it would look awesome. But the ones I have now look awesome too. But, this whole theme, guys, just reminds me of one of our friends who says, the future is unknown. And then I like to kind of make a joke, like, it's almost like the future is unknown. And very few people think beyond tomorrow. They can't think past the next 5 minutes. And I understand everybody's busy, but the future is unknown. You have to plan for it. And you have to put those tools in place that are going to be there when disaster strikes, whether that's natural disaster or just
political disaster.
How many as we age, right? We have all known people who have graduated earlier than expected, right? We all have known multiple people, whether it was in an aircraft mishap or whether it was just due to other, maybe they had cancer or whatever. I met a young guy the other day. He's like 40. He had a heart attack when he was 30 years old.
Wow.
And so anyway, all that being said, gotta have it.
Ryan, go ahead.
I was just going to ask the question and how you guys talk to your clients. Most people don't have any problem at all, sending off that monthly mortgage check. And they go, okay, and I get that that's your home and you live in it, but they know, oh, I'm building equity. I know this is a good long-term plan. But yet writing a check for overfunded whole life is like they're giving it away, like it's going into Never Land. And I just don't understand how, what the thinking behind that is. And just wanted you guys to kind of talk about how you would explain that to them or give them the concept of what they're really doing here. Because one of the things I bring up, I go, well, yeah, you don't have access to all that money right away, but if something happens to you, you just got a 14,000% return on your money.
Attention aviators, when you've spent years in the cockpit managing the complexities of flight, isn't it time you navigated your retirement with the same precision? Introducing retirepilots.com. Right at your touchdown zone on our homepage, there's a beacon flashing, "Get my free toolkit." Click that and you'll be cleared for a direct route to Ryan's retirement toolkit, tailor-made for pilots like you. Inside, you'll find two of his important works, The Pilot's Advisor and Pilots Retire Early. Between these two books, you can decipher the 9 critical decisions when retiring before 65 and discover the 7 lessons to help pilots land safely in retirement. But that's not all. This toolkit is packed with altitude-high value, including extras to get your retirement plans off the runway and light the afterburners on your 401k. Vector on over to retirepilots.com to grab your toolkit, and let's embark on this journey together.
Yeah, no question. I think, Ryan, for a tangible actions that someone could take listening to this right now that isn't maybe one of your clients yet, or isn't one of our clients yet, or whatever, is that they could, listen to your content, read Becoming Your Own Banker, listen to our content, and they will begin to understand. That's always going to be my what I tell people to do is go listen to this, read this book, and then let's come back and have a session and talk about it. But you're right. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, and the way we structure, IBC, I'll quote quotations, IBC style policies is with a paid up additions rider, which that premium goes almost, it buys death benefit, but it goes to early cash value access, right? So you pay a PUA rider, you can, 2 weeks later, 30 days later, take that money right back out, most of it, like beyond 90% of it, if you needed to in an emergency. So you're right. If someone is willing to blindly hand money over to these other things, whether it's, paying extra on their credit card or paying extra on their student loans or whatever, which is money that's gone forever, extra on their car payment, they should be more than comfortable once the understanding is there of paying high dividend-paying whole life premium.
But
again,
or
they
even
don't know that
sequencing it through a life insurance plan. Even if you have it earmarked, sequence it through an insurance plan. And one of the big ones I run into right now is these. I have all my money sitting in a high yield savings account, and I'm
Which
going,
is great
okay,
right now.
Well, even then, they think it's great because of what it's paying right now. But the funny part is that's just because that's the cost of capital. That's where inflation is right now. You're still treading water,
Right.
Yeah.
And to feel so comfortable to have a lot of money sitting in a high yield savings account versus what could be doing for them in a tax-free manner and liquidity in a insurance plan.
Right. So to kind of piggyback on what Paul said, and Paul says this all the time, most people's understanding of life insurance, of whole life insurance, is based on somebody else's misunderstanding. Because where do most people get their financial information? Well, the millennials listening, most of them get their info from TikTok. And and a lot of us pull our financial acumen or recommendations from people close to us who are not financially successful.
Uncle
Why
Bob.
the hell would you ask your father for financial advice if he's dead broke at the age of 65? Why? Maybe ask him, hey, Dad, what would you do differently? Not what did you do? Give me some advice. Because of that, all their advice, guaranteed, it's going to be whole life is a stupid investment. And the fact that they pair whole life with an investment in the first place means they don't understand it because it's not an investment. And that's very important to understand. Investing involves risk. Savings doesn't. Whole life insurance does not involve risk whatsoever other than transferring risk to somebody else.
Which is even more interesting though, because every once in a while, most pilots are type A and they don't mind taking risk, but you'll find one that's very risk adverse, and yet they still can't see how safe a policy is. And I know I passed along a client to you that was like that, and it took him a little while, and then all of a sudden the light came on. And I think it's tough with pilots because they're always talking in the cockpit, and the ones that think they're the smartest, that type A guy that thinks he's the smartest,
the arrival
tends
syndrome.
to not be set up, as successful as others.
Yeah. Well, that makes me laugh because I remember having lunch with a captain I was flying with back when I was flying, and I was telling him about whole life insurance and where I put my money. And he's like, I'm pretty conservative, so that doesn't sound like it's for me. So he just puts his money in the market because he's more conservative. I'm like, okay, you obviously don't have any understanding whatsoever because you can't find something more conservative or safe or guaranteed to do with your money, truly.
The other thing that I started figuring out over time, and I think this is when we get, in our 40s, we're all in our 40s, right? And you did all the things you were supposed to do. Okay, I maxed out my Roth IRA, I maxed out my 401k. And two things, and what's the next step? What am I going to do with my money to build that liquid security? And there's all these different vehicles or, an investment account, a savings account, an overfunded whole life policy, right? of what's next. And I think it's this, but the thing that really opened my eyes to this was I started seeing what very wealthy people are doing. I mean, very, very wealthy people, high income earners, business owners that are making some serious money. Guess what they're doing? They are putting a ton of money into overfunded whole life. The person, especially as they get into retirement or getting close to retirement, they start thinking about sequence of returns risk, okay, and how to prevent that, okay? Overfunded whole life can help you prevent that. They start thinking about having permanent protection for their family, but if they don't have it in place, it's too late or it's too expensive. And it's funny how pilots, as they get closer to retirement, all these concerns and questions come up that they never thought about. Yep. And I always say it's pretty hard to clean up the mess at that point versus planning. And if you planned ahead, not only is it much cheaper, it's much more efficient, and you don't have those concerns in retirement.
All right. Love it, man. Thanks for joining us again, Ryan. And how can people, what should people do as a first step to say contacting you and learning more about what you can offer?
I think the best first step is just go to retirepilots.com. You could go there and order my free retirement toolkit. It's a couple books. It's got a bunch of flyers in there about different things that you probably want in your retirement toolkit to start thinking about. And then you can, there's ways that you can reach out to me. I'll do a free portfolio analysis. We'll get on a Zoom call and actually go through things together, talk about your concerns, compare returns, and talk about all the different things that you might not be thinking about in retirement.
Awesome. Thanks. I ordered the toolkit. It was great. I read your books. Great info in there. So awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks for joining us. And we'll look forward to having you on again pretty soon.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.